They said you could smell him before you saw him. It wasn't just the smell of unwashed clothes or sickness. It was something primal, a stench so foul that visible steam would rise from his body like a furnace in winter. He was a man who was always sweating, always panting, and always starving. This isn't a myth. This is the medical record of a French soldier, a showman, and a spy named Tarrare. A man with a jaw that could unhinge like a python. A man who didn't just eat food, he ate stones. He ate live cats. And eventually, he was accused of eating something far worse. This is the story of the man with the bottomless stomach. Born near Lyon, France, around 1792, Tarrare started life looking like any other child. But by his teenage years, his parents realized something was terribly wrong. He could eat a quarter of a cow in a single day, meat, fat, gristle, and bone, and still cry from hunger pains. But the terrifying part, he didn't get fat. At 17 years old, he weighed only 100 pounds. He was impossibly thin, with fine, fair hair, but his skin was like a deflated balloon. When he was empty, the skin around his waist hung in loose folds, almost like an apron he could wrap around his body. But when he ate, his stomach would inflate. It would blow up like a massive balloon, stretching that loose skin until it was tight and translucent. Doctors described him as hot to the touch. He sweated constantly, a biological furnace burning through calories faster than he could consume them. His parents couldn't afford to feed a bottomless pit, so they kicked him out. Tarrare roamed the French countryside with a band of thieves and prostitutes, begging and stealing food. But he quickly realized his curse was actually a talent. He became a street performer. The act was simple. The crowd would hand him things, anything. He would swallow corks. He would swallow flints. He would swallow entire baskets of apples, one after another, storing them at his cheeks like a chipmunk. But the crowd, they wanted a show. They wanted blood. Medical reports from the time state that Tarrare would take a live cat, rip it open with his teeth, drink its blood, and swallow it whole, leaving only the bones, which he would vomit up later. He did the same with puppies, with lizards, with snakes. He was a monster to them, but the crowd couldn't look away. When the War of the First Coalition broke out, Tarrare joined the French Revolutionary Army. But the military made a huge mistake. They gave him standard rations. A single loaf of bread wasn't even an appetizer for him. He began doing chores for other soldiers in exchange for their scraps. He was found scavenging in dung heaps. When that wasn't enough, he collapsed from exhaustion and was carried to a military hospital. The doctors there, Dr. Corville and Baron Percy, didn't see a soldier. They saw a medical marvel. They decided to test the limits of his hunger. They prepared a meal meant for 15 laborers. Tarrare ate the entire thing in one sitting and fell asleep immediately. But while the doctor saw a patient, General Alexander de Beauharnais saw a weapon. He looked at this man who could swallow anything and hide it inside his massive stomach, and he had an idea. What if Tarrare wasn't just a hungry soldier? What if he was the perfect secret agent? And that is where the story goes from gross to dangerous.
The general didn't care about Tarrare's health. He cared about the war. And he had a theory. If this man could swallow a basket of apples without chewing, could he swallow something strategic? He presented Tarrare with a small wooden box, about 3 inches long. Inside, he placed a document. He closed the box and told Tarrare to swallow it. Without hesitation, Tarrare threw his head back and gulped. The box vanished. 2 days later, the box emerged at the other end. The general opened it. The document was still legible. It was a perfect biological safe. Tarrare was immediately recruited as a spy. His mission was simple, or so they thought. He was to carry a secret message to a captured French colonel imprisoned behind Prussian lines. He would swallow the box, sneak across the border disguised as a peasant, pass the box in the latrine, and deliver the intel. In exchange, they promised him the one thing he wanted more than anything else: a wheelbarrow full of bull lungs and liver. But there was a problem. Tarrare was not a spy. He was a starving, desperate peasant who didn't speak a word of German. As soon as he crossed the Prussian lines, he stuck out like a sore thumb. He was wandering around, looking suspicious and, as always, desperately hungry. The Prussian soldiers captured him almost immediately. They stripped him and searched him, but found nothing. Tarrare refused to speak, so they whipped him. They beat him for hours until his resolve broke. He confessed to everything. He told them about the message in his stomach. The Prussian commander was furious. He chained Tarrare to a latrine and waited. For 30 hours, Tarrare sat in agony, waiting for his body to give up the secret. Finally, the box appeared. The Prussian commander grabbed it, washed it off, and tore it open, expecting vital military intelligence that could turn the tide of the war. He read the note, and then he screamed in rage. The message was blank. It was just a test. The general hadn't trusted Tarrare with real secrets yet. The note simply asked the colonel to confirm if the box had arrived safely. The Prussians were insulted. They dragged Tarrare to a gallows and put a noose around his neck. They were going to hang him right there. But at the last second, the commander looked at this sobbing, starving, pathetic creature and decided he wasn't worth the rope. They beat him one last time and kicked him back toward the French lines. Tarrare crawled back to the hospital, broken and traumatized. He found Dr. Percy and begged him, actually begged him, not for food, but for a cure. He didn't want to be a spy. He didn't want to be a freak. He just wanted the hunger to stop. Dr. Percy agreed. He put Tarrare on a strict regimen. He tried everything medical science in the 1790s could offer. They fed him laudanum, a powerful opiate to dull the pain. It didn't work. They fed him tobacco pills to suppress his appetite. It didn't work. They fed him wine vinegar and soft-boiled eggs. Nothing worked. In fact, the diet restrictions made him worse. The hunger fought back. And this is when Tarrare changed. He wasn't just a scavenger anymore. He became a predator. He began sneaking out of his bed at night. The nurses would find him in the apothecary, chewing on the used poultices, bandages soaked in pus and blood that had been taken off wounded soldiers. When they locked the apothecary, he went to the morgue. He wasn't just looking at the bodies. He was eating them. The other doctors were horrified. They demanded Tarrare be transferred to an asylum or a prison. They called him a ghoul, a demon. But Dr. Percy refused. He was obsessed with the case. He insisted that Tarrare was a victim of biology, not a villain. He kept him in the hospital, convinced he could cure him. He was wrong. The breaking point came a few weeks later. A tragedy that no one could explain away. A 14-month-old toddler, the child of one of the hospital workers, went missing. They searched the grounds. They searched the wards. The baby was nowhere to be found. Until everyone turned and looked at Tarrare.
Dr. Percy couldn't save him this time. The hospital staff was ready to kill him. They chased Tarrare out of the military hospital, and for 4 years, the man who could eat anything vanished into the shadows of France. We don't know exactly what he ate during those 4 years. We don't know who or what went missing in the towns he passed through. We only know that he didn't get better. He got worse. He resurfaced in 1798 at a hospital in Versailles. But he wasn't the young soldier anymore. He was dying. Dr. Percy was called to see him one last time. Tarrare was bedridden, weak, and frail. He told the doctor that he had swallowed a golden fork 2 years ago, and he believed it was stuck inside him, tearing him apart. He begged Dr. Percy to operate, to take the fork out, to save him. But Percy knew better. He examined Tarrare and realized it wasn't a fork. It was advanced tuberculosis. The man who had consumed mountains of flesh was now being consumed from the inside out. A month later, Tarrare began to experience severe, continuous diarrhea. His body finally gave up. He died at the age of 26. And this is where the story should end. But the most horrifying part of Tarrare's life was his death. Almost immediately after he took his last breath, the body began to decompose at a supernatural rate. The smell, that legendary stench that had followed him his whole life, became a physical force. It was so potent, so unbearable that the nurses in the room gagged and fled. The chief surgeon, Dr. Tessier, wanted to perform an autopsy. He had to know what kind of machine was inside this man. But the smell was so bad that his assistants refused to enter the room. They had to open every window and door in the hospital just to breathe. Eventually, fighting through the nausea, they cut him open. And what they found defied biology. His gullet, the tube connecting the mouth to the stomach, was abnormally wide. So wide, in fact, that when they opened his jaws, the doctors could look down his throat and see all the way into his stomach without using any instruments. And the stomach itself? It was enormous. It was covered in ulcers and filled almost the entire abdominal cavity, pushing his liver and lungs aside. His liver was abnormally large and shapeless. His gallbladder was huge. His body was essentially hollow, a giant biological bag designed to do one thing: consume. They searched the stomach for the golden fork Tarrare claimed he had swallowed. It wasn't there. They searched for the bones of the animals he had eaten. They found nothing. Just a massive, ulcerated void. The smell became so overpowering that Dr. Tessier couldn't finish the procedure. He stopped halfway through, ordered the body to be closed up, and demanded it be buried immediately. Tarrare was laid to rest in a hurried grave, his secrets buried with him. History remembers him as a monster, a ghoul who ate garbage, and possibly a child. But in the end, Tarrare was a tragedy. A man born with a curse he didn't understand, living a short, painful life in a body that was always full, but never satisfied.